All right, 2 Kings 2, let's call this one Through the Eyes of the Prophets. Enough shame, because in this chapter, we are going to see the baton passed from Elijah to Elisha as Elijah gets ready to be taken up by God. And they are going to travel from, I believe it is, Gilgal to Bethel to Shechem. And at just about every stop, Elijah is going to ask Elisha to stay here as he goes on by himself. But Elisha, not willing to leave him alone, at each point is going to be like, I'm not leaving. And so eventually, as they come into different groups of the prophets, at least twice, the prophet's going to be like, Elisha, you know that God's going to take Elijah from you today, right? He's going to be like, I know, be quiet. So after that happens a couple of times, they are going to get to the Jordan River. And Elijah is going to pull off his cloak, or in some translations, maybe his mantle. He's going to strike the waters, and in much the same way that under Joshua's leadership, Israel entered the promised land, crossing the Jordan on dry ground. Now Elisha and Elijah are going to cross the Jordan as they prepare for Elijah to be taken up. And so now, instead of asking Elisha to stay behind, he's simply going to ask, what can I do for you before I go? And Elisha is going to say, please grant me a double portion of your spirit. But the story is not going to seem to portray Elisha as having gone all this way just to get something from Elijah. What he is actually doing is making a request that's going to be huge in his ministry going forward in the rest of the chapters, where we'll see him in 2 Kings. But before that, Elijah is going to say, that's a tough request, but if you see me as I'm taken up into heaven, it will be granted for you. And so as they continue to walk and talk, God sends the chariots of fire to pick up Elijah to take him up into heaven, at a point where Elisha actually does witness it as he cries out, my father, making it clear it doesn't seem like he just wanted something from Elijah. He really just wanted to be there with him at every moment possible. And he is going to be rewarded for being there with that double portion of Elijah's spirit. So as he goes back by himself to the Jordan River, like Elijah did, Elisha is going to strike the waters with Elijah's cloak. The waters are going to part, and he is going to walk back across the waters to meet the prophets who have been waiting with them at a distance. And now Elisha is going to spend some time with a group of those prophets in Jericho. But Jericho, even though it's described as a nice city, is going to have a problem with its water, a problem that Elisha is now going to be equipped to handle, understanding that he's got this brand new double portion of Elijah's spirit. And so he is actually going to heal the waters at Jericho. But as he is leaving town, he is going to face the harassment from a group of small boys the chapter is going to describe. But he's not going to be in the mood to deal with it today. And he is going to turn, curse the boys, at which point a bear is going to come out of the woods and maul them. 42 in number, the chapter is going to say. And that's going to seem to be a harsh response if we take that incident out of the context of the way in which the prophets had been killed and chased and ostracized up to that point. Understanding, going back to the first chapter we talked about this week, 1 Kings 18, how the prophets had to be hidden in caves to be safe from Jezebel. Elijah, even after a victory at Mount Carmel, was chased to the point where he simply asked God to take his life. And going on forward to prophets like Micaiah, their reward for simply telling the truth is being locked up in prison on meager rations of bread and water. And understand that in that context, this story is probably still never going to sound anything other than a harsh response to a little bit of taunting. But understand the way in which accountability or sudden accountability is always going to seem harsh, whether it's happening to kids or adults of any age. It's always going to seem harsh in an environment where accountability has been allowed to slip. But if we remember this, it is not God's job to pump the brakes on our car, and we can avoid the harsh realities of sudden accountability. Understand the ways in which self-discipline can have the same role in our lives that pumping the brakes can have on our car. Because God does not always promise to bring us to gentle stops in places where we refuse to pump the brakes. And so us going through this story in 2 Kings chapter 2 seemed to be right on time with what was happening with the global financial scare this week. Since 2 Kings chapter 2, even though it is a harsh story of abrupt accountability in a society that had spun out of control, it's a great opportunity to take a pause and, God willing, seek his wisdom to help us understand the value of beginning to pump the brakes. So that moving forward, God willing, we can avoid the unnecessary pain associated with sudden accountability.